The five facets of business, we look at culture, strategy, operations, story, and finance. The story is essentially sales and marketing. And we take a systems-based approach. And so often what we see in organizations is that they're good at two or three of those categories. And the other two or three are dragging them down a little bit. And so if you tweak one, if you move one, if you shift one, it means you're going to tweak, move, and shift the other four things if you're not paying attention to it. And so we take a systems approach. And one of the quotes we often use with clients is, the system is perfectly designed to produce the results that it's producing, which is, well, yeah, of course, kind of a statement.
Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen, to everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. From the doctor saving lives at your local hospital, to the war veteran down the street who risked his life for our freedom, to the police officers and the firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling. But there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored. The entrepreneur, the creator, the producer. The ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what? I can fix that. I can help people. I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world. Others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks on the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome back to The Hero Show. My name is Richard Matthews, and I have the pleasure of having on the line today Dave Newell. Dave, are you there?
I'm there. It's good to be with you.
Awesome. Glad to have you here. I know we've been chatting for a little while before we got on, talking about our projects and farm life and travel and all that kind of stuff. Why don't we start off? Where are you calling in from today?
I am based in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Charlotte, North Carolina. That is a beautiful part of the country. I've gotten to spend a little bit of time up in Greer, South Carolina, which I think is only about an hour and a half south of there.
Yeah, not too far.
Yeah. We spent a Christmas up there, and I got to say, the water in that part of the country is the best tasting water in the whole country.
Oh my gosh, I'm glad you said that. We have a well, and it might be my favorite water, like more than bottled water, anything you can get, mineral water. Like our well tap water is exceptional.
It's one of those things that, like, unless you've actually traveled and been around, you don't understand like how vastly different the water quality is as you travel across the country. And then you get into North and South Carolina, and you guys literally have billboards on the freeway that like, our tap water is exceptional. And you're like, what? That's weird. Who advertises their well water on their billboards on their freeway? North and South Carolina do, because it's freaking phenomenal.
Because it's actually pretty good. Yeah, exactly.
Because it's worth putting a billboard up about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh man, that cracks me up. So, and then for my audience that's, follows along with our travels, we are in Central Florida in Kissimmee, and, in the process of working on buying our sailboat. So we may not be in the RV in this studio for too much longer, but for now we're still here. But what I always like to start off with, Dave, is just a quick bio on who you are, so our audience knows who you are, and then we'll dive into your story. So Dave's on a mission to align the misaligned, building a successful consulting business that applies the 5 facets of business operating system. Dave serves as a fractional president and COO, consultant, and facilitator, serving small businesses and startup leaders to build out their C-suite leadership capabilities and provide the systems thinking and operating systems needed to grow and scale a business. So with that little introduction, Dave, why don't you tell us what you're known for, right? What's your business like? Who do you serve? What do you do for them?
Yeah, great question. And also good job reading all of that. There's a lot of complicated words, and I'm realizing how many S sounds are in there. And you nailed it. You crushed it. Good job. I work with small business for the most part, anywhere between 5 and 50 employees. And we often meet them in transition spaces. So that might mean that, they're at 3 million in revenue, and they've kind of stuck at 3 million in revenue for a couple of years, and they're trying to figure out, how do we get to 5? Or they're at 15 employees and they're growing, and they're experiencing some of those growing pains. So they're experiencing transition. And often we try to transition folks from what we refer to as the big dog operator mentality into systems and structure, right? So in order to scale, you can't, what got you to 3 million isn't going to get you to 6. And so we have to think a little differently. We have to operate a little differently. So sometimes that fractional role, consulting, advisory, it really depends upon what the client needs. But we've worked with clients across the country, internationally. We've been really fortunate to have a pretty big reach and continuing to grow in a lot of those spaces. But yeah, we love what we do.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I got to tell you, systems and processes are they're my favorite part about business. So like, it's the thing that like makes my heart go pitter patter. Um, and, and so this could be a fun interview, I think, because like we actually just did a major overhaul of all of the, essentially the operating system running the deliverables and the onboarding section of our business, reduced our labor costs by almost $8,500 a month,
Wow.
which we didn't like lay anyone off. We just redirected all that energy into more profitable areas. But like the things that you can do when you actually think through and build a system are crazy. And like we were just running some numbers on some of the stuff that we do. So like my audience knows my company's called Push Button Podcasts, and so we run B2B podcasts like this one for 30 plus shows, and we're bringing on 4 or 5 shows a month. So we're growing pretty rapidly. And over the last year, we've managed 32,500 social media posts, and that's everything from long form YouTube videos, long form audio, long form blog posts, and then short form content on every single platform for multiple clients, right? It's a tremendous volume of content that's being created. And I haven't touched any of it in years.
Yeah.
And it's all because of what you're talking about, right? Having actual systems in place that, it allows us to grow. It allows us to have a business that, actually provides like the freedom that people get into business for, right? We travel full time and we run our business virtually, and all of that comes from being able to build a business system. So anyways, I am super fascinated to learn what the 5 facets of a business operating system are, because I'm sure we can make ours better.
Well, I'm glad you talked about the systems process piece. And it's often, I think we build stuff like when you're building a business, you're a startup, or even if you've been around for a while and you enter the leadership team, a lot of what gets built is reactionary to things that are happening. And so you build, you kind of scrap a system together, you put something together to deal with you take on your first client, you're winging it, you're making it up, you're doing the best that you can do. And every once in a while, that's what your system becomes as you try to scale. And then you try to scale this thing that you kind of made ad hoc at a period of time, and inherently it becomes unscalable because it's custom every time or because something gets in the way. I think the last time you and I talked, you were migrating from ClickUp to a new system.
The Smart Suite.
Yeah, Smart Suite. Yeah. So we implement ClickUp. We do all sorts of different things with companies, and it's often like, look, there's probably 5 to 10 activities that you do that create 80% of the results. Let's get really good at those 5 to 10 things, and let's make sure we're measuring those 5 to 10 things. Let's make sure we understand those 5 to 10 things inside, up, down, left, right, east, west, whatever you need to do. So you can do 32,000 social media posts and not have to think about it because you're organized and because you got it clean and clear and the systems are in place. So I love that. I love that example. The 5 facets of business, we look at culture, strategy, operations, story, and finance. And story is essentially sales and marketing. And we take a systems-based approach. And so often what we see in organizations is that they're good at 2 or 3 of those categories. And the other 2 or 3 are dragging them down a little bit. And so if you tweak one, if you move one, if you shift one, it means you're going to tweak, move, and shift the other 4 things if you're not paying attention to it. And so we take a systems approach. And one of the quotes we often use with clients is, the system is perfectly designed to produce the results that it's producing, which is, well, yeah, of course, kind of a statement. But when you really think about that, whatever result you're getting, if that's poor employee performance, if that's missed targets, if that's fires, if that's, internal communication breakdowns, if that's drop in sales revenue, it's like your system is designed to do that right now. It's achieving the results that it's supposed to be achieving based on how it's designed. And so we have to actually zoom out and look at the system and say, well, what are the aspects of the system that are creating those results, and then modify and adjust it. The 5 facets is really, these are the 5 major systems in your organization. Let's organize each one of those 5 things and make sure they're swimming in the same direction.
Yeah, I love that. And particularly the system is producing exactly the results that it's designed to produce. I say something similar, right? That is, you deserve to be exactly where you are. And, it's just that one of those harsh truths that like, if it's doing something, you've designed it to do that thing, maybe not intentionally. And I talk about this a lot in process of mastery is very similar. That, a lot of people have reactions, right? They react to things. And a lot of people assume that, if you have a bad reaction, that it's the reaction is the problem, and the reaction is not really the problem. It's the invisible choices that were made that led to the reaction. So like the process of mastery is learning to take, the stimulus and the response, which is that reaction, and spread those two things apart and see what all those decisions were and learn to master the decisions that are in between them, and then put the time back together, right? So that when you actually have stimulus and response, so you have the reaction, that the reaction is the one that you want, right? That the system is actually doing what you want to do. And so that applies to mastering your golf game or learning pool, or, you're talking about building projects on the farm or doing it applies to everything. But in your business, the result that your business is designed to do, right? The decisions, those invisible decisions are those systems that you've built, right? And the reaction is, if the reaction is, your staff is not sticking around and you're having to hire and retrain people all the time, those decisions are the ones that you've built into the system. And so you have to spread it apart, see what those decisions are, and design them to get the result that you want, and then compress the time back together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really great narrative for it. We often talk about just container setting. Like, how often does decisions get made based on how you felt that day, or based on what you were thinking about, or you're reacting to something that happened over the last couple of weeks, or you had a bad relationship with somebody for a week and now you're kind of frustrated with them, or we kind of call it like exhibiting your toddler behavior, right? Everybody's a 5-year-old at some point in the day. Like I
have a 5-year-old. I feel that.
Exactly. Like I had a 5-year-old moment earlier today. Nobody's immune from that, but when we make decisions from that place, it's rarely the best decision, right? And so that idea of container setting, you talked about this, prior to the show, about putting some rules in place for yourself. Like, what are some of those decisions? Like, what's the boundaries in which we make decisions around process, or what's the boundaries in which we make decisions about behavior from a cultural perspective in our organization? Having those boundaries then allows it to make more streamlined, consistent decisions that don't feel personal to your team, right? Or to yourself or to your team. So, each of the 5 facets has, design elements, which is like, okay, so what's the container that we're setting around culture? So that's often, purpose, vision, values, behaviors kind of work. And they have execution elements. And so how do we actually deliver those things? And so, Seth Godin defines culture as people like us do things like this. And I think it's this beautiful, simple, clean, clear, description that only Seth Godin can do. But people like us do things like this. And if you think about that for each facet of your business, people like us do things like this. People like us is, what's the design? What's the frame? What's the container? How do we define kind of what people are, and then do things like this? And these are the activities that we do that make that part true, right? And so the third prong to that wheel is then, what are the leadership behaviors, or what are the behaviors that we expect from people to make that happen? And so when we talk about systems alignment, we're talking about the design, the execution, and the behavior need to line up in order for your business to be successful in all 3 of those categories. And so we want to make sure that we're taking a look at all of those elements.
Yeah. It reminds me of an example that we were talking about with my ops team recently. And so it just ties right into what you're talking about there. And it was about disciplinary actions, of all things. So disciplinary actions are, I think a lot of people, as particularly when, CEOs and people who are running small companies, right? We have that very reactionary mentality of like, they're not doing the thing that I want, they're the problem, and then I need to fix that problem. And so when I started sitting down with my ops team, I was like, listen, the problem always starts with us and the design of the system. And so the first part of that is, did we design an SOP that makes sense, right? Do we have a documented process? And so if the process is well documented, that's the first step. That's our problem. And then the second one is, have we clearly communicated that SOP to the person that's executing the thing? And if not, that's still our problem. It's still not the employee's problem. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then you have like, okay, so they've like clearly, and then the third one is like, we've clearly communicated the SOP. Do we then have a way to track and measure their activity on that? And if not, that's still our problem. Right. And if all of those 3 things are satisfied, then we start getting into the point where maybe we have to have a discussion with the employee. Right. And you realize that like, it's all in the way that you're building the system for it. And what I've found, and then this is just experimentation on my part, because I've only built one business. Well, I built a few, but this is the biggest one that I've built, is that if you do all of those things first, you very rarely get to the point where you ever even have to have disciplinary actions.
Right. We call it, are we creating the conditions for them to be successful?
Yeah.
right? And so the conditions that you kind of articulated, do we have good process? Are we measuring well? Like you kind of stated some of those, like, do we have a good design? Those are the conditions in which an employee can then be successful. Without those things, we're just hoping. We're hoping that they're a good employee. Like we're using the hope strategy,
Great
which is
method.
successful on occasion, right? Like sometimes hope is true, and sometimes it's totally not. So not a great long term strategy, not a great long term play. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And I wanted to pull up one other thing that I think would be useful to talk about. And this is just for, because
yeah,
you mentioned finance being one of the big categories, one of the five categories or the five facets of business, and how, what got you, I think what you said earlier is what got you to, 3 million won't get you to 5 million, right? We're not that big yet. But one of the things I've noticed, and it's one of the reasons why we did like our switch over from ClickUp to SmartSuite and everything, is we built all of these systems for a certain sized business doing
mm,
a certain number of like a certain volume of things with a certain number of employees. And like everything that we built in ClickUp, it was actually easier to switch to another system than it was to rebuild it in ClickUp for the volume that we were doing with the number of team members that we had and everything that we had. So it's not really a system dependent thing. Like, it wasn't dependent on which project management system we were using. We got to a certain size, we had to rebuild things. And then alongside of that, as we've hit a certain size of our business, like we're no longer in a bootstrap stage, right? The first
yeah,
300,000 or so, dollars of revenue of building the company to that size is all bootstrap, and everything was like, how do we make this as lean and mean as possible with as little resources as possible? And now we're starting to get to the point where we're, because of the economies of scale, our
yeah.
systems are producing more than they're costing. And now we have more resources available to put into things like designing better systems or better hiring processes, or, better marketing and better storytelling and other things. And so like, if we continued to operate the same way that we were, we would not be leveraging the resources we have now. And we wouldn't do a good job of, taking care of our business.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really fabulous example. I mean, it's what Jim Collins calls the flywheel, right? Like how things fit together to create this kind of spiral movement forward. When we think about finances, there's kind of two things that I see that companies, especially small startups or especially companies that you're kind of bootstrapping your way through things, is often they're thinking month to month in finances. Like they're not necessarily forecasting forward and then making a plan for, okay, if things go really well, here's what we're going to do. Like, if, let's say our forecasted target is $1 million. If we get to 1,000,002, here's the things we can do. If we're at 1 million, which is what we think it is, here's the decisions we're going to have to face, and here's what we're going to have to do. And if we undershoot the budget, let's say we hit 800,000 or 750,000, here's the difficult decisions that we're going to have to make. So even to go back to your point earlier of how can I separate myself in time from the decisions I might have to make 9 months from now if we're forecasting our budgets forward, right? So even just paying attention to where are we going to be 9 months from now, 12 months from now, it's difficult to know that perfectly every time, always. But even the exercise of looking forward and then figuring out what are some of those major decisions that we're going to have to make if we get to that point, and you start making those decisions earlier. So forecasting is a huge part of it. Most people think like, are we going to make payroll this month? Are we going to make payroll this month? And they're just trying to like get through the month. And it's like, that's worthwhile thought. Absolutely make sure you get through payroll. But that narrow scope then doesn't prepare you for the long run. And the second piece we often pull forward is Mike Michalowicz wrote a book called Profit First. And I think it's really profound in many ways, but it's this general idea of pay yourself first, like put profit in the bank, like make sure that profitability is happening. So the general idea is, instead of, profit or revenue minus profit, sorry, I'm saying this wrong, revenue minus expenses equals profit. The general idea is, revenue minus profit equals expenses. And
Yeah.
if you can kind of change your mindset towards that, you actually change the way you think about your business. You change the way you think about, well, should we take on, should we use this software or not? It's like, well, how is that going to affect our profitability? Should we take on this client or not? Should we hire this employee? It starts to shape. It's a container for making decisions, but the container is, what's our profitability, and are we committed to a certain percentage, whatever that percentage might be. And I think if you can shift those two things mentally, that we're actually looking ahead, we're forecasting, or we're kind of pre-making difficult decisions before we get there, and we're actually really committed to profit. Not only are you preparing yourself to have a really healthy business in the long run, but you're also preparing yourself to be attractive to potential buyers in the long run, right? Like you
Yeah.
can create a very sellable business if you're organized and if you have a plan around profit and forecasting.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. We actually Push Button Podcast manages the Profit First Nation podcast for Mike and Danielle
Oh, you do?
over there.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing. He's a great dude.
yeah, they're really cool. It's a cool team to work with, and I actually have a whole Profit First like dashboard that we keep track of everything in. So it's got like if you like change the number of clients that we have, it actually like will automatically adjust the scale of if you're between 1 and 10 million and 10 and 20 million, like all the way through, and the percentages and everything. So it all like lays out for us, and it goes all the way down to like the individual amount of hours it takes for a single person on our team to complete an episode. So like if you change the number of episodes, it adjusts the profitability across the whole thing, because I'm super nerdy about that stuff. And I said, we're still, we are still a low profit business. We're working through that first couple of percentage points of building the profit stuff. But we started Push Button Podcasts at the end of 2018, and we started implementing Profit First at the beginning of 2023. And we were very slow growing, and we implemented Profit First, and we 7x'd our business that year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think it's a great testimony to the mental philosophy. And obviously you've put some tools in place. You're a good mechanic and a good builder, right? Like you like putting the tools in place and having the right tools. And I can't tell you how many organizations I've worked with where those that are really committed to the data and to the numbers and putting numbers first and paying attention to the numbers and how the numbers weave together, the most successful businesses I work with that are small businesses are super hyper vigilant about hitting the numbers, and they know what the numbers are, and they're super committed to the numbers. Like that, even that alone transforms the way you approach and address your business. You remove anecdotes, you remove guessing, you remove hope as the strategies, and you start to make very informed decisions. And you also really target your people towards something tangible.
yeah.
This is the number we're going for. And there's something very motivating, compelling, and engaging about that.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating sort of bit of the business. And one of the things I'm realizing is every time we hit like a next level in business, there's a whole bunch of numbers I didn't know I should have been paying attention to that I should probably be paying attention to, it just cracks me up, because I'm like, I'm never getting good at this. I'm just good at whatever the last stage was, and the whole next stage is like a toddler again. But the on the numbers thing, like we've gotten to the point now where like most of my staff is on salary, including our contractors and whatnot. They're all on salary, but they all still track their hours on a per task basis. And then the other day, so we actually follow the same sort of profit first mentality in hiring employees. And so like we were working through with my ops team, how do we adjust, our post-production team? Because we're going to have to, as we're starting to get more consistent with closing sales every month, we're going to have to get more consistent with hiring people onto that team. And so my ops manager was like, she asked the team lead, she was like, how many hours on average does it take someone on your team to accomplish something? And I was like, we actually track all of that. I pulled up the little thing in our Smart Suite dashboard, clicked a button, and boom, here's the average number of hours on that. So we could see it, right? Because if you have the numbers for it, you can make much better, much faster, much more informed decisions, whether it's hours for an employee or profit that's coming in, or, cost per lead. Or I think one of the numbers I've recently started tracking because of Alex Hormozzi's book, is the ratio between your cost of customer acquisition and your, what's the other one? The lifetime gross profit. And so like we're at like 3.45 to 1 right now. And if we can extend our what's it called? The number of months that a customer stays with us by like 3 months, we'll turn it into like 7, right? Like 7 to 1 ratio, which is legit, right? That's like a really good number. So we have targets that we're running towards.
100%. A lot of, I'd say a handful of my clients in recent times have been Amazon marketing agencies, right? Like, so they support product sellers on Amazon getting on the front page, right? Like increasing their sales. And one of the biggest challenges in that environment is it's a churn and burn industry, right? Like you get a lot of, clients, if you can, the first 3 months of a client, you basically break even whatever it is that you're charging them, because the amount of time it takes for your team to onboard, get them up and running, to figure out the percentages, how the ad spend works, how creative, you get creative involved, etc. It's like where the gravy is month 9 through 12, right? Like that's where your profitability kind of skyrockets, but it's really difficult to keep a client around for 9 to 12 months if you're not hitting some of those results. And so, but for example, if you make retention your focus, right? So acquisition is almost always the most expensive way, right? Like just acquiring new clients is really difficult. It costs a lot of money. It's a lot of time, energy, and effort. especially with onboarding, et cetera, kind of depending upon what your industry is, retention is where the margin is. So if you think about, you kind of anchor yourself in a strategy of retention. It's like, well, if your goal is to keep clients around for 18 months and that's a target, whether it's arbitrary, invented, whatever it is, or if it's really statistically true of like 18 months is the sweet spot, and that becomes your strategy, an 18-month retention strategy. Okay, so that changes the way you think about selling. It changes the way you think about onboarding. It changes the way you think about the first 3 months of their engagement. It changes the way you think about the results. It changes the way you communicate with your customer, because the goal is retention, right? The goal isn't let's acquire and then hope it works down the line. Let's be really thoughtful about our strategy of retaining a client, right? So we talk about it as a strategic identity. What is the one thing that we're going to do differently than everybody else does? So one of our marketing agencies that we worked with picked the strategic identity of retention as transform their business from a profitability perspective, because they're not thinking client acquisition is the target. Client acquisition is part of the story for sure. Retention is the target. It changes the way they operate, changes the way they communicate, changes the way they focus, changes even who their client base is and how their client base thinks. And so their profitability has grown from 5% to 20% over the last 2 years, because they're working really hard to keep clients around longer.
Yeah. For our audience who's paying attention, if you want retention as a huge part, Joey Coleman's book, Never Lose a Customer Again, is really, really good on talking through those things. And we've been looking at that ourselves, because it's like, we know that, onboarding is like break even for us. And it's like, we start to be profitable, on month 2, 3, 4, 5. But it's like, it's minor. But like, if they stick around for more than a year, it's crazy how much more valuable that customer is to us. Yeah. And so, we've been looking through like, well, just as a really simple example, again, we're in the podcasting space, something like 3% of podcasts never make it past episode 10. And all of our customers do, right? And so, and then it's something like less than 2% make it to episode 50 and less than 1% make it to episode 100. And so we're like making up YouTube plaques for our customers, like when they get to the 50 episodes, which is about a year, right? Send them a plaque, things like that. And so we're trying to come up with strategies of like, how do we create, more retention, and how do we make it so that like being here is just, it's a stupid, simple decision for them to say, yes, I want to continue working with you.
So. Yeah. Just out of pure curiosity, again, I'm breaking format here a little bit, but why do you think it's hard to sustain podcasting?
So there's probably a couple of reasons, but the big ones that we have found are people don't know how to set their environment up so that it's easy to record, right? And so we talk about things like having a mini studio, right? Couple of lights, camera, microphone, backdrop that are just super easy to set up, sit down, and record. Psychological barriers to action is what we call those, right? Mm-hmm. One of my favorite examples of that is like, I have a water flosser, right? And I had put it by my sink for a good long while, thinking that, after I got out of the shower, I would use it, and then I never did. But I moved it like 3 feet into the shower. Now I use it every day, right? Because I take a shower every day, right? And so it's just learning how to set your environment up for success, because podcasting works when you can do it consistently, right? When you consistently put the effort in. So that's the first one. The second one is they don't know what to talk about, right? Because you have your topic for your show, right? We're talking, we talk podcasts all the time, and there's not a lot that goes into a podcast. So you're talking about the same 5 or 10 things in 100 different ways. So we do something we call a content planning session, where we help them map out how to talk about their topic for an entire year, and then how to turn that into multiple years worth of content, so they can approach the same topics with fresh new ideas. And then the third one, rather than knowing what to talk about, is knowing what to say when you hit start record, right? So after that, between the start and stop record button, what are you actually going to say? You have a topic that you want to talk about, but what are you going to say about it? And so we teach a little bit on how to build an outline out of a topic, and so have a consistent structure that makes it really easy to just build yourself a recording outline and know what to talk about. So just as a very quick example for anyone who's in the audience listening, we follow something I call the WIN formula: what, why, how, now. And so here's what we're talking about. Here's why it's important. A couple of reasons. Here's how we're going to talk about it, right? It might be a set of criteria, might be a set of steps or something like that. It might be the interview questions that we're going through on here. And now is your perspective on the topic, right? Which is like a story, a case study, or an example or something. And with those 4 things, what, why, how, now, you have the baseline for a really good podcast or YouTube video or really any kind of content creation, but it helps solve that other problem. And most people don't have those three skills in place. That's our 80-20. There's some other things, but like if you get those three in place, 80% of people will consistently run their podcast over the long term, which is really where the benefits come.
Yeah, because they start to see impact, right? Like I would imagine, the people that do 10 episodes probably have a higher need. To your point, like, is it simple? Is it easy? Is it something that they can do from a habit-based perspective? It's not so time-consuming. But also, it's unlikely that you're going to get, any significant number of subscribers in your first 10 episodes, right? So there's a bit of a delayed gratification as well, that you're combating, but giving some of those tools for, here's what satisfaction looks like. Like, what's the podcast for?
Yeah.
Like, what are you trying to accomplish? We're getting clear on some of that. I imagine matters.
It's crazy what happens when you get over the long term, right? Because like we've been running this podcast here since like 2018, 2017. It's been a while. And like first 50 episodes, almost zero impact on the business. Second 50 episodes, starting to make an impact on the business. We're at 260 plus episodes now. I'm talking to venture capitalists. I've got CEOs of companies reaching out to me asking to be on our show. I've got a longer list of people who want to be on our show than I have time to do interviews with. We did $250,000 in revenue just from partnerships that came from the podcast last year, right? Like you get a few years into it, when you consistently put the effort in, it changes the game, right?
Yeah.
So
there's a time-based element to it. I mean, to your point around retention too, then it's like the longer you retain a client, the greater the impact that you have for them. And so, going back to kind of the piece before this, if that's your strategy and you kind of build yourself around it, part of the reason why I asked the question is because you know the answer to it, because you're paying attention to retention.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're paying, like, it's a thing you have to solve for if you want to keep people around. You have to know what their pain points are and you have to solve it. I think that's a really good example. I appreciate you breaking form with me and letting me ask you a question.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we've been like 32 minutes into the podcast here, and I haven't even asked you any of the questions that we normally get into on the Hero Show, but I told you this is going to be a fascinating conversation because I think, you do professionally a lot of the stuff that I have realized we have to be really good at in order to run a business. And it's a really interesting discussion because a lot of people get into, just like Michael Gerber's E-Myth, right? People get into business because they're good at solving a particular problem, not because they're good at running a business. Yeah. And so what you're talking about is like, these are all the skills you have to learn in order to take that problem that you know how to solve and turn it into a scalable solution for the marketplace. And so like, it's like a masterclass in learning how to grow a business.
Yeah. I mean, we like to use the phrase, like, you have to work on the business, not just in the business, right? Like the business itself is a problem to solve, and it's a continually evolving problem. There's always going to be conditions that are outside of your control. There's going to be things that are inside your control. But if all you do is, work in the weeds and try to solve everything that's right in front of you, you're going to lose sight of how are we organized? Are we efficient here? What's the containers that we have, et cetera. Our job as outsiders looking at your business is we can see it much more cleanly and clearly than you can because we're not stuck in the weeds. We don't know all the details, right? Like I routinely have outsiders looking at our company because I can't see what they can see, right? I can't see it with fresh eyes every time because I'm in it all the time and I'm thinking about it all the time. Do I zoom out and do I follow our own philosophy? Absolutely. And at the same time, it's really difficult to do on your own sometimes. Sometimes you just need an outsider saying, hey, why do you do things this way?
Yeah.
And it's never an appropriate answer to say, oh, we've always done it that way. It's like, no, you haven't. Somebody made that up. Somebody invented that at some point in time. We can move that. We can fix that. We can change that.
I call it, it's my little bit of dark humor coming out, but I call it the bus principle, right? If Richard gets hit by a bus tomorrow, how does my team make payroll 3 months from now? Right? Yeah. Like not tomorrow, but like 3 months from now, that they're still making payroll, whether or not I'm here. And like right now, business can't do that, right? But you got to, but it really helps me hone in on like, what are the things that I own that I need to not own, right? And so we're systematically working through each little segment to get to the point where like, okay, I no longer need to own that anymore. And like we had a big celebration just this last week at our company because my sales staff closed the first 2 sales that I had nothing to do with. And by nothing, I mean like I didn't have anything to do with the marketing. I didn't have anything to do with the lead generation. I didn't have anything to do with like the operation, like to getting people through the sales process. My first interaction was when I got the calendar notification that they were on my calendar for like a first call. And I was like, that's a big thing because that means that system,
That's huge.
yeah, now no longer needs me to run, right? And
Yeah.
that's where, I've been out of the ops for a while, and now I've gotten out of the sales and marketing. And so like my next stuff, like I know what my next things are. My next things are like, how do I get myself out of payroll, and how do I get myself out of, the marketing strategy part of the business. And the goal is like, I want to get myself out of everything and accept the vision and leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's kudos to you. I think that's an amazing feat because you're combating the thing that we talk about the most with clients is the big dog operator mentality, and that mentality is like our identities as business owners, as bootstrappers, as people building a company is often wrapped up in our ability to go around and solve problems and be good at the thing that allowed us to build the company in the first place. What we have to be really good at is letting go of that identity of I have to be the one to fix it. I have to be the one to run this because I'm good at it. And it's not just the founder that has that. It's often the first 5, 10 employees that you have in your company who all kind of carry that mentality because it's what got you to 1 million or 2 million or 3 million or
yeah,
whatever
yeah.
you.
I like,
And you have to be able to let go of that identity to get to the next stage, which is now my identity is actually the builder of the system, the structure, the organization of the company, so that other people can come in and solve that. That's how you scale. That is the mentality for scaling. And you've been a good example of it, it sounds like.
I like sales as an example for that because like as the founder, I have a couple of like benefits, right? I know everything really well. I've also been
Mhm.
professionally trained in sales, but like there's some special benefits of being the founder and doing the sales that like
Yeah.
my close rate can be like 80%, right? 85% on a good day kind of thing. Like I talk to 10 people, 8 of them become clients. My,
Yep.
your best sales guy, like, a good sales guy is going to close average of, 20 to 30, but even if they suck, right? They close 5% of their deals. They can talk to 100 people and outsell me all day, right? Because they have more time to put in that. And I can hire 5 or 6 or 10 of them, right? If I hire 10 people and they each have a 10% close rate, guess what? Our sales volume is higher than if I'm doing the sales.
Yeah.
So
100%.
it's, I don't know, you can do so much more and solve more problems and just, you can have a bigger impact in the world if you get yourself out of, I like your term, the big dog operator, because I don't want to be the big dog. I want to be, I don't know what I want to
Right.
be, but it's not the big dog. I need something
I
else.
want, I want to be the one that walks the dog.
Yeah, there you
Right?
go. I want to be the one who walks the dog.
Dog walker. That's right. We got to start a dog walking business. Maybe that's a new way we'll frame that. Create a dog walking business. Yeah.
Awesome. So we've been talking for a little while here. I want to get in and talk about your origin story. How did you get into what you do now, right? Every good comic book hero has an origin story. It's the thing that made you into the hero you are today. And we want to hear that story. Were you born a hero? Or were you bit by a radioactive spider that made you want to get into business, the 5 facets of business? Where did you start in a job and eventually become an entrepreneur? Basically, tell us a little bit about where you came from.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in kind of rural Minnesota, farm country. My first work was, driving combine. We didn't live on a farm, but we had relatives that did it. I was driving combines and doing some farm work. Did a lot of maintenance work growing up. Had kind of hardworking middle class family. Both my parents were government employees. Had kind of hard work, stick with it. Service oriented people, right? Like they'd help anybody. They'd help anybody do anything. And so I've always kind of had that helper instinct. I've always had that work ethic of, show up, do the work, get into it. Everything's going to be fine. We'll figure it out. And I think that mentality has kind of permeated everything. And so I wouldn't say I have a superpower necessarily other than the idea of we'll figure it out, right? Like fairly unflappable. But the origin story, I went to college. I didn't really know what I wanted to do in college. I'm the third of three. Both my brothers are highly successful people. And, I kind of came out of college like, man, I never really had a direction. Never really had like a clear path in my mind of like, this is the thing I want to do. I ended up, kind of out of college, getting into some community organizing work, getting into leadership development work in higher education. So I kind of came from this facilitation, systems thinking, leadership development, leadership design, getting multiple people moving in the same direction from a community organizing perspective. And all of those things taught me so much about alignment, and they taught me so much about human dynamic, and they taught me so much about, all right, well, this government entity sees it this way, these farmers see it this way, and this, nonprofit environmental agency sees it this way. They all want different things, but they all have to work together to get to the same target. How do we do that? So those were kind of the questions I was dealing with, early in my career. And so I think the ability to see how things function, how things work, what motivates people, what doesn't, and then to put those pieces together is a huge part of the origin story. And then, come 2012, I got connected to a couple guys who were doing, some consulting work. They were looking for some additional facilitators. They did mostly sales training. They coach kind of large scale bids. So construction, architecture, engineering bids, like multi-billion dollar projects, and they're coaching the sales team. So I got in with those guys and they taught me a lot about how the consulting world works. And I totally fell in love. It was like instant, like, this is my environment. This is where I'm supposed to be. I loved the high stakes. I loved the challenge. I loved the large scale problem solving. And so in 2014, started this company, kind of punched my way through for the first couple of years. And just in the last, basically 18 months have kind of built this framework, been pushing this framework into the world based on the things that we've seen over the last decade of doing this work, and, tested it for years, and have now kind of gotten to the point where we feel like, all right, this product that we've got is fine tuned. It's worked. We've tested it 100 times. We know it works. We've seen the results. It's knowable and repeatable. All right, let's bring this thing into the world. So, kind of came from a weird background in the sense that I didn't start in business. I didn't start, in a corporate setting, running large teams. I actually came from a teacher and a facilitator perspective and an organizer perspective. And so, those skills translate really well into getting leadership teams, into getting, teams following and operating in a system, because that's really what this is.
Yeah. I love that. So you got a kind of a storied past going from farm to college to, I don't know if you'd call that like translator work almost. You're translating what the farmers want with what the government people want, and into the consulting. So all over the place. I do, however, take issue that you don't have superpowers, because I think you do. And so we talk on this show, every iconic hero has a superpower, whether that's their fancy flying suit made by their genius intellect, or the ability to call down thunder from the sky. In the real world, heroes have what I call a zone of genius, which is either a skill or a set of skills that you were born with or you developed over the course of your career that energize everything else that you do, right? And the way I like to frame it for my guests is, if you look at everything that you've done over the last, you said almost 12 years now, right?
Yeah.
There is probably a common thread that ties a lot of those skills together. And that common thread is where you're going to see your superpower. So I have some ideas. Before I say what they are, I want to get your thoughts. What do you think with that framing your superpower is in your business?
Okay. That was helpful context. So zone of genius is helpful. I can speak from there. Honestly, the thing that I think separates myself from other consultants is I'm not running the same program every time to a T. What I think my zone of genius is taking really complex problems and making them simple, right? Like, I think
Cookies on the lower shelf.
Exactly. Like, I see the system pretty fast. And so somebody could give me 10, 15, 20, bits of information. We're dealing with this, and this. And what I hear and what I see is, oh, so what you're saying is this thing. And I can see the input, I can see the influence, I can see the causation pretty quickly. And I can say, all right, this is where we need to focus. And for them, that's often eye-opening, right? It's often like, oh my gosh, this is thing we've been thinking about for 2 years and we've never been able to see it. Now I can see it, right? And so once you get that clarity on the front end, the pathway, how you solve it, how you move forward, how you deal with it gets clearer and cleaner, right? And so it's that getting to insight piece that I think is really the superpower that we bring. Like, I can candidly say, you talked about your sales ability. Like, I don't view sales calls as sales calls. I view them as coaching opportunities. I view them as an opportunity to give that person a gift, right? Which is this gift of insight.
Yeah.
It's like, it takes all the stress of like, I need to close this deal. I need to close it. It takes all that away from me. And it's more of like, look, I'm trying to just help you see something that you haven't been able to see before. And if I can do that and our solution matches what you need, great. And if it doesn't, either way, you got to walk away with this gift of insight, and you can take whatever path you need to take to go do that. So I would say that's really the zone of genius for me personally, is being able to simplify the complex.
Yeah. It's not often I get people on the show that I think have the same superpower that I do, which
all right.
gives me my follow-up question is, you are probably interesting to watch movies with. And here's why. And I'm just curious, because you do the same thing I do. I can't watch a movie and enjoy it the way like my wife does. Like, when I'm watching a movie, I'm like, I'm seeing the lighting scenes, I'm seeing their scene selection, I'm seeing the camera shots and the angles that they're putting together. Like I see the whole system that's happening, and seeing the system and everything that's making the story, and like seeing the story arc and the types of story arc that they're using and how that it's functioning and flowing together. Like that's the enjoyment of watching a good movie for me, is all the systems that make the movie happen. And I have gotten into the habit of, I have to like shut myself up when I'm sitting down to watch a movie with my wife, because she's like, you'll ruin the story because I'll figure out everything that happens before it happens because I'm following all their arcs and whatnot. I'm just curious if you do something similar.
Yeah, absolutely. On the second part of that, I mean, honestly, my favorite movies are the movies where I haven't been able to predict the ending.
Yeah.
Like where I got a little bit, bamboozled, so to speak, right? Like where the ending twisted, and I was like, oh, okay,
You're like,
that
I
is not what
missed
I
that.
thought it would be. You got me. I love it. So like, I like those movies because it's not predictable. But the same thing. I'm always like, if a moment comes up, or if they introduce a little, funny thing, like, oh, he put a hat on in this scene. That's weird that he put this hat on. I'll be like, I bet that hat comes up in 20 minutes from now, and I bet there's going to be a story around this, and I bet this is what's going to happen. Like that's what's happening in my
Yeah.
brain. Like, why would you introduce the hat otherwise?
Yeah.
That doesn't
'Cause
make any sense to the
you
story.
don't put a gun in the scene if you're not going to pull the trigger. Right.
100% right. So yeah, I'm always predicting in my brain, what's happening.
Yeah.
To your
And
point,
that's
not to say that.
it's a systems thinking. Like I don't even know if you'd call it a flaw or something, but it's just something that those of us who see the world that way, like when I talk to people who don't have that same sort of like lens on the world, and people ask me like, how do you see the world, or how do you do the things that you do, and I'm like, I don't see what you see. Right, the world I see is very different than what a lot of people see, and there's plenty of people like us that are the systems engineers and nerds and whatnot that see the world that way, but it's definitely not a super normal, like a regular superpower. And so it's interesting to see where you've gone with it, and it makes a lot
Yeah,
of sense, right? The consulting world is a great place for it.
yeah,
And I did consulting before we started Push Button Podcasts, and helped several people crack the $1 million stuff on their business. And it was at some point I realized, I was like, oh, if I take all of this stuff and build it into my own business, like I could do cool things with it. And that's where like Push Button Podcast came out of that same sort of like systems thinking of like, what happens if I take all of this stuff that I've been helping other people do and just build it into a service that we have all the control over. And so yeah, it's definitely an interesting superpower, and it's something that has its own set of struggles that go along with it as well, which leads me to my next question, which is your fatal flaw. I mean, I'm interested to hear your answer because I'm curious if it's similar to mine. But every Superman has his kryptonite. Wonder Woman can't remove her bracelets of victory without going mad. And you've probably got a flaw that's held you back, something you've struggled with. For me, and this comes right out of that systems thinking, it's perfectionism. Right? I can always make something a little bit better. I could change the system a little bit more. I could make it a little bit stronger before we put it into market, or before we put it in front of our team, or publish that issue or whatever it is. And because there's always more tweaks you can make. And so that's one of them. I got a few others, but I think more important than what the flaw is how have you worked to overcome it so that you can continue to grow. And hopefully sharing your story will help our listeners learn a little bit from your experience.
Yeah, I love that question. I'm happy to answer it because I think it's an important thing for us to know and to connect. One of the things I think about a lot is, especially as we deal with leadership behaviors, is right. Even the things that we think are strengths are also, they have a shadow and a light, right? Like sometimes me applying my zone of genius is the perfect solution to whatever's happening in that space. And sometimes me applying my zone of genius is the worst possible thing that could happen in that space because it's the wrong fit for the environment and what it's asking for. My fatal flaw is often kind of maybe twofold but complementary. One is I have a tendency, because I can simplify things, I can see things relatively fast. I also have a quick start and I want to go now. Right. So it's like, no, this is what we need to do and we need to go. And sometimes for my teammates, or sometimes people that are on my team, or the people that surround me, they don't see it that quickly, or they're not seeing it fully, or they want more details in what's going on. And I don't need details. I need to know like what's the general story, and then I can go. And so my fatal flaw is often when we get really nuanced and detailed and specific, my brain can start to just be like, and why are we still talking about this? Why are we still talking about this? We need to go. But that stuff is very, like, I'm not trying to undermine the value of getting into the details and getting in the weeds. There's moments where that's super important. So the way I manage that is actually I surround myself with people who don't have my same zone of genius very intentionally, and I trust them. and I give them a lot of responsibility, and I want them to challenge me, and I want them to push, and I want them to say, hey man, slow down a little bit. Like we gotta actually walk through this. It's going to help us understand it. My job in that is then to say, hey, you know what? You're right. I'll pause. I'll kind of push the pause button. I'll let you do your genius, right? Like I'll let you live into your zone of genius. So my number two, our general manager in our company, her and I are very aligned in terms of how we think about things, how we see things. But she is a process and execution maestro. She's amazing, and she loves to do all the things that I don't do. The reason we get stuff done in our company is because she does it, because she organizes it, she puts it into play, and she makes it happen. And for me, I want to be in strategy conversations. I want to be designing things. I want to be solving big problems and paying attention to the big stuff. I don't want to get into the weeds. That's not my space. And so we're a pretty solid 1-2 punch, and we have a lot of trust with each other because we're not trying to play in each other's spaces, because my zone of genius doesn't need to be her zone of genius.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, it should be the opposite. If I surrounded myself with people who were like me, we'd have a fun company. It would be great.
The
In
Justice
in
League would
terms
be
of like
boring if everyone was Superman.
long, it would be amazing, but we wouldn't put a lot of things out the door.
Yeah. So the Justice League would be boring if everyone was Superman. Yeah.
100%.
And I'm the same way, right? My number two, my ops manager, she's wonderful. She'll probably listen to this episode. But the thing that the way my weakness sort of shows up is that whole perfectionist thing where I could always make it a little bit better and work on the system a little bit more. Is I've realized like I am same kind of thing, quick start, and I don't mind getting into the weeds a little bit as far as like helping to build the system and whatnot. But like the most I can ever take it is 80%. Right? I can take it to 80%, and then I need to give it to someone else to take it that last 20% and actually like do the rest of the stuff with it. Because one, I will just continue going, and I need someone to be like, nope, like it's good enough. Let's get this going and get it off of the out of development and into the thing. And then the other part of that is I like to figure things out. Right, that quick start is like I've got a big problem, I got a big strategy, got to filled all the things, and like as soon as I've solved the problem, I no longer care. Like it's very boring at that point. And so like a lot of what happens in business is like you have a big problem, you solve the problem, and then you're just going to continue solving that same problem over and over and over again for 100,000 different people in 100,000 different ways. Like your system's designed to handle all that, but like I already solved it. Like it's done. I need a new problem.
Yeah.
Or I'm just not engaged.
You're preaching to the choir, man. I couldn't agree more. I'm the exact same. Like if it's part of why consulting really works for me and why we're good at it, right? Is because we can get in, we can fix things, we can take it to the end, and then I get to go on to the next one and the next one and the next one. And for me, that is exciting and interesting, and I love the opportunity to serve folks. I love the opportunity to get in and help folks see things that they couldn't see, but I don't want to maintain it.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be the one running it day in, day out, seeing those types of things. And there's people that are more in that maintainer mindset, and they're incredibly valuable and important and necessary. That's just not me.
Yeah.
It's just not me.
We hire people that love that stuff.
Yeah. It's amazing. I value that way of thinking and that way of operating a whole lot. I just don't want to be.
Yeah. It's just not that I don't want to do it. It's that I literally can't. Like I can't do it. I do not have that skill. Or I can, but it one of the things I've learned as I've gotten, as I'm grown up as an entrepreneur, that the most important resource I have to protect is my energy, and things that sap my energy are more dangerous than things that I like, than almost anything else in my business. And so I need to find what are the things that energize me and do more of those. And same kind of thing with our team and our staff. How do we find work that energizes you, makes you come alive? So,
yeah, I think it's a really astute thing to know. We do an exercise. We call it the DAD exercise, but it's delegate, automate, or delete.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, okay, so to do that exercise regularly, to say, okay, so what do I need to delegate? What do I need to get off of my plate? What are those things that like, and there's kind of 4 quadrants to it. It's like, what do I love to do? And it makes sense for me to keep. What do I like to do? And it makes sense for me to keep. What do I hate to do? But it makes sense for me to keep. And but it might make sense for me to do it. And what are the things that I hate to do and doesn't make sense for me to keep? And if I just look at all my responsibilities, it's like, okay, can I delegate, automate, or delete this thing? Right. So if I don't like it, but it's important, can I delete it? Can I delegate it, or can I automate it? If I hate it,
in that category for me.
Yeah. It's like, can I automate that? Is that something I can get rid of? Is there a $300 a month company that can do that for me? It's worth that time. Like if I'm not spending my time doing that or whatever it might be. But that exercise, we often take our clients through that exercise a couple months after we engage with them. Once we get clear on strategy, once we get clear on building certain things, it's like, all right, and let's also make sure that we're maximizing, kind of what you should be doing. And let's make sure we're elevating the people that like the things that you don't like. And let's give you that energy back. Let's give you that time back. It's not about hustle, right? It's about working smarter.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your clients, right? And so we
Yeah.
talk about your common enemy, right? And every superhero has an arch nemesis. It's a thing that they have to constantly fight against in their world. And so in your world, we like to put it, like I said, in the context of your clients, and it's a mindset or a flaw that you constantly have to fight to overcome so that you can actually get them the result that they came to you for in the first place. So in this world of helping people with these 5 facets of business, what is that common enemy that you regularly have to fight against in your world?
Yeah, the biggest obstacle I run into in working with clients, I would say, is ego and pride. It's we know we need to fix something, but I'm not really willing to change. I'm not really willing to put in the effort to shift. I'm really partial to the, like, it's kind of like pride and ego gets in the way of transformation and action. And so, what we really focus on to combat some of that is you talked about it when you mentioned kind of how do you make podcasting easier for yourself, right? We start to talk about like, well, how do we get the ego and pride out of the way if we need to combat that big dog operator mentality, for example? Like, how do we get pride and ego out of the way? Because that's an identity, that's pride, that's ego, that's identity. How do we get that out of the way? Well, we do it by making the transformation really small. It's like one of our leadership philosophies is make it small. How can I make it just one thing that you have to do once, and how do I make it easy? Right? So for example, instead of like, well, you get really emotional in meetings, you should really, not be so emotional. Like, what an unfair ask of somebody, right? Like,
Yeah.
stop being what you are 100% of the time. Like, that feels just really wrong. Like, how do you ask somebody to do that? But we might, or, I'm a recovering yes person, right? Like, just, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll take it on. Yeah, I'll try it. And for me, it was, okay, how do I say no once this week? Just once. I don't have to say no to every meeting. I don't have to like transform the way I operate and just become a no person all the time. But how do I make it really small and just build the capacity and the propensity to do that when I need to do it? And so when we think about kind of ego pride as the arch nemesis, so to speak, that we combat in an organization, that like my identity is wrapped up in this thing, but you need to be something else in order for your business to accomplish what it needs to accomplish. Our job is just to make that as small as possible and to encourage movement. So we don't talk about outcomes when it comes to those things. We talk about movement. Like, we're not looking for the end. We're just looking for to go, right? To
Yeah.
do something different.
The thing I love about that is you've probably heard the mentality before, and I think all of our audience is probably familiar with the term fake it until you make it. I've always
Yeah.
hated that, not
Yeah.
because it's not true, but because it seems not genuine. And here's the reality. The reality is you are the sum total of the actions that you take, not the thoughts
Right.
that you have or the dreams and beliefs that you have. You are the sum total of the actions that you take on a daily basis. And so the cool thing about that is you get to choose your actions, right? Which is,
Yeah.
we had earlier in this conversation the idea a reaction is basically an action that you haven't chosen the decisions, right? They've happened
Yeah.
automatically. And so if you can learn to spread those things out and make those decisions ahead of time, right, you can change your reactions, but your actions define who you are. So by taking the mentality of like, hey, we're not going to change who you are, we're going to change a small action that you can take today, you're slowly changing the identity of that person by changing the actions that they take, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's brilliant.
Yeah. We and I have to credit this to Pete Makalek at Dean Hires, the guys that I first started working with when I did the consulting work, but they said the same thing. Like, they hate the phrase fake it till you make it, but they would say be it till you see it. And I really like that, right? Because be it is like calling you to do something. Like, be it, try it. Like, don't fake it, just be it. Like, try it in a small way. And then as you start to see it, then it starts to creep its way into like, oh, actually, I am somebody that can do this. And like you start to transform that identity. So the idea, instead of fake it till you make it, which I totally agree feels disingenuous, is be it till you see it. Take those actions, try it, and pretty soon it starts to become your reality. And now, you'll never remember, or unless you look back on, some historical data or something, like you won't even remember the old version of yourself because you're living a whole new one.
Yeah.
And we've all transformed throughout our lives at some point in time. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
universal.
My most recent sort of example out of my own life, and if people have been listening to this podcast for the last few months, they know it because I've talked about it a few times, is we started doing martial arts training with my son last year.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I wasn't fit before, but we're taking these actions, 4 times a week with a martial arts trainer who is pushing us really hard. And we're taking those actions every day. And I wouldn't have looked at myself a year and a half ago and told you I was a fit, athletic person, right? I wouldn't have called that as my identity. I wasn't unfit. I wasn't like unathletic or anything, but it wasn't something that I would have called out as part of who I am, right? As an identity thing. But I've been taking these actions every day, and now it feels like it's part of my identity, right? It feels like it's part of who I am, that I have strength and capacity and fitness that I just didn't have before, because it's, the result of the actions I've been taking, right? And so it's become part of my identity, and it's changed my baseline. And it changed my baseline, not because I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to become a fit, athletic person. I was like, nope, I'm going to go do this hour-long session 4 days a week with an instructor. And yeah, it's the actions that change who you are.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because I often think about, well, what are the spaces in my life that I think about all the time, right? So I think about family all the time. I think about work all the time. Like those are two things that just consume my brain space, right? But I would imagine, you weren't necessarily thinking about it from a health perspective. You were probably thinking about it from like, I want to be there with my son. I want to support my son in his endeavor. I'm thinking about that from the perspective of being a dad, right? And now being a dad and being committed to that part of your life has had a positive impact somewhere else in your life. And I think about like, what are some of those things that I do that when I really focus on them actually create the spillover effect, right? Like they create this effect in other spaces of my life. For me, that is when I commit to reading and writing.
Yeah.
And not even as like, oh, I'm trying to create content, I'm trying to put stuff out because that's what I do from a work perspective. But I'm actually just reading and writing for me, to learn, to grow, to etc. And when I do that, every other aspect of my life starts to get better. And so I mention that because sometimes the making it small and sometimes that incremental growth that we're talking about isn't always in the thing that we think about all the time. It's this other thing that has outweighed impact that when we do it makes everything else better. So part of it is kind of pushing into, so being a dad, it's like, well, you got fit because you were actually being a focused, committed, caring dad.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Cool story.
And it was interesting because when my martial arts instructor sat down with us at the beginning, and he was like, what's your goal? Like, what do you want out of this? And what I told him was I wanted to be fit and young forever. And the reason I wanted to be fit and young forever is because I wanted to be able to keep up with my son as we continue to travel the world together, right? He's 14 now, and I'm, when we started, he was like 13 or whatever. It was like, they grow really fast and they get really strong and really fit really quick as they go through their teenage years. And I was like, and I want to be able to I don't want to be outpaced by him and not be able to do the things that he wants to do because I haven't done the work I needed to do. Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So like, that's what I wanted out of it. And, we're getting that out of it, which is really cool. To your point, there's all sorts of things that like in your life that are like that. Like, so one of the things that I have sitting here, I mentioned before, I've got a piano sitting under my desk. I pull the piano out and I can actually play here at my desk. I was having a really hard time getting my left hand to work with my right hand. So I learned to juggle, right? Because I actually hired a juggling coach and learned to juggle because I wanted to get my brain to be able to operate with my left hand. And, it's weird how there's always little things like that. When you take the actions, it impacts lots of other things. And it's also had same impact with, the martial arts too, where, we do a lot of stuff with the left hand and the right hand where you have to do the same thing both ways. And it has just really, like, I guess the word would be like visceral, like you can see them and touch them and feel them impacts in other areas of your life. And yeah. So everything sort of connects together, which is really cool.
Yeah. No, it's a really cool story. I like that.
Yeah. So I only got a couple more questions for you. I know we're going a little bit long here, but it's a fascinating sort of conversation. So I'm going to talk about your driving force, right? So the flip side of your common enemy is your driving force. And just like Spider-Man fights to save New York, or Batman fights to save Gotham, or Google fights to index and categorize all the world's information, I want to know what it is that you fight for, your mission, so to speak. What is it that you're trying to accomplish with your company?
Yeah. We talk about aligning the misaligned at the outset, and aligning the misaligned doesn't always mean tragic. Like misalignment doesn't mean, everything's on fire and everything's burning down. But what we really like, I'm genuinely committed to alignment, because what I see is when things are aligned, people are happier, businesses are better. They go home and their spouse's relationship is better. They're better parents. They're better friends. The effect of working in an environment that feels aligned and connected to who you are and how you want to operate. You're not coming home burned out, stressed, etc. Like the outweighed impact that has on communities and lives feels really important to me. It's part of why I felt really connected to business and why I left higher education, because to me, part of higher education had such a delayed effect on kind of the larger scale of life, where business to me, I could walk in and within 4 hours, we could transform the way a team operates in a significant way, or we could transform this thing that felt really heavy, that was creating a lot of pain for people. And we could do that really quickly. And for me, that was transfer. That fired me up instantly. I walked in, I'm like, okay, I like this, because I can see how this starts to impact not just this business, but it helps people, it helps businesses and the people in them flourish. And when we say flourish, we mean like they can just live a better life. And because they're living a better life, so are the people around them and the people that they're connected to. And so, our outweighed impact, when we say aligning the misaligned, it's a very specific approach to what we're trying to do, but the impact is, people's lives get better really fast.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of that, and we have a similar sort of philosophy over at our company. But what I want to sort of call out of that is the idea of the increased capacity you create in the people you work with to show up for their community. And I have realized recently, when I say recently, I'm like the last 3 or 4 years of my life, that we've reached a stage, and maybe that's an age thing, maybe it's a certain level of business thing, maybe I don't know what it is exactly. I haven't quite thought it through well enough to know, but I realized that I'm no longer on the young entrepreneur side, if that makes sense. We're on the other side, where like I know enough and I failed enough and I've caused enough problems and solved enough problems that there's people behind me that I have lessons to pass on to. And having those lessons to pass on is not just a would be nice if, it's almost feels like there's a bit of an obligation to show up for my community the way that my community showed up for me and allowed me to get where I am. And whether that is in being a dad, or that's running a business, or that's traveling, any of the things that I have put the work in for over the years, I have some sort of a feeling that like, hey, there is some sort of a social responsibility to show up in my community and help in the ways that I can. And one of the things that I realized has allowed me to do that is having as much as I can aligned in my business. Right. And because if my business isn't firing on all cylinders, it gets all the attention. Right. And I don't have anything left over for my community. And the more my business is going, the more everything is working well in my business, the more I can show up for my community. And like this year has been especially, like there's been a lot of stuff where I've had the opportunity and the privilege to show up for my community in ways that would be unheard of for a lot of people. And it's just because the business is working the way that it is. And so anyways, I think it's a really worthy goal, and it's very real for people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it speaks to both pieces for me, right? Which is I want to make sure that I'm aligning people, right? So like the coaching, the like working with leaders, working with behaviors, like I want you to be aligned with who you are, how you operate, like what's a good life for you. Let's align that. But then let's also connect it with the systems and how you operate in your business. And when those two things feel lined up, you remove a lot of the tensions and the anxiety and the frustration that shows up in the lives of people, that then, to your point, kind of translates into like, I worked in a fairly unhealthy environment for a while back when I was employed by other people. And I mean, it's all I talked about at night. I'm sure, my wife's a therapist, so that's, that's, a fortunate thing to have at that point in time. And she's very good at it. But, it's good to talk about other things too, not just how crappy work was that day or how frustrated I was about this employee or this situation or that issue. Like our lives and our relationships get better, when things are good at work, because a lot of us work a lot and it consumes us, and we think about a lot, especially entrepreneurs and small business leaders. It consumes our brains
Yeah.
most of the time. Yeah. So if we can create some space and reduce some of that anxiety, we're just creating space for people to make good dad choices and good mom choices and good partner choices and good community choices, because we're creating the space for them to flourish in all aspects of their life.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that, I talk about this a little bit. Eventually I'm going to write a book about it. I have an idea for a podcast called Undeniably Good that is about some of the things that humans do that are just insane. And one of the things that we do is we build community, right? And we're one of the few creatures that do, if not the only one that builds it, especially the level that we do. And one of the things that fascinates me about, I believe it's, like the study of ancient people, right? The ancient societies, is that you can trace the beginning of civilization back to the healing of broken bones, right?
Interesting.
And so, because if, Joe breaks his leg and he doesn't have community, Joe dies.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if Joe has his leg mended and someone helps take care of him and helps feed him and whatnot, Joe lives. Right. And so like that very baseline of like taking care of the other people in your community is like a baseline fabric of society. And so what you're talking about is like, hey, if we can help you get your business all aligned and everything going up, you can show up for your community and you can help Joe with his broken leg. Right. That's a, tongue-in-cheek sort of example. But the idea is you can show up in your community and you can take care of those around you, and that lifts everyone up. It's what makes the fabric of society better.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in return, when your leg breaks, because stuff happens, right? You've created the conditions and the reciprocity for that person to want to do it for you.
Yeah.
I think it's a kind of universal pathway to building a better place, right? Like in every business I've ever been a part of is a community, whether they view it that way or not, they are.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're a small group of people that has impact on each other, whether that's positive or negative, and how they show up and how they're committed. And even to what you were talking about earlier, if we can create the conditions for everybody to be successful in that organization, we're increasing the likelihood that they're good people in other places too.
Yeah.
And now a quick word from our show's sponsor. Hey there, fellow podcaster. Having a weekly audio and video show on all the major online networks that builds your brand, creates fame, and drives sales for your business doesn't have to be hard. I know it feels that way because you've tried managing your show internally and realize how resource intensive it can be. You felt the pain of pouring 8 to 10 hours of work into just getting 1 hour of content published and promoted all over the place. You see the drain on your resources, but you do it anyways because you know how powerful it is. Heck, you've probably even tried some of those automated solutions and ended up with stuff that makes your brand look cheesy and cheap. That's not helping grow your business. Don't give up though. The struggle ends now. Introducing Push Button Podcasts, a done-for-you service that will help you get your show out every single week without you lifting a finger after you've pushed that stop record button. We handle everything else: uploading, editing, transcribing, writing, research, graphics, publication, and promotion, all done by real humans who know, understand, and care about your brand almost as much as you do. Empowered by our own proprietary technology, our team will let you get back to doing what you love while we handle the rest. Check us out at pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero for 10% off the lifetime of your service with us, and see the power of having an audio and video podcast growing and driving micro celebrity status and business in your niche without you having to lift more than a finger to push that stop record button. Again, that's pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero. See you there. And now, back to the Hero Show.
So that brings me to my last question for you today, and that's your guiding principles, right? One of the things that makes heroes heroic is that they live by a code. For instance, Batman never kills his enemies. He only ever brings them to Arkham Asylum. So as we wrap up the interview, I want to talk about the top 1 or 2 principles that you live your life by. Maybe something that you wish you knew when you first started out on your own entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, I have 4.
4.
So I'm not following your rules. I apologize.
That's all right. I'm fine with 4.
Okay, so I follow the philosophy. These are the core values of our company, but they're also mine. And it's an acronym we use called LEAP. And so the idea of LEAP is leverage tension, earn trust, add value, and pursue purpose. And so for us, leveraging tension is to go to the hard place, Like where most of the good stuff is in this world is when you lean into the hard place instead of running away from the hard place. And so we often use the buffalo story, which is, if you've never heard it, I know it's become a little bit of a popular thing, but if you've ever been, I know you've been across the Midwest, you've traveled a bunch.
Yeah.
I don't know why I was going to say if you've ever been. Of course you've been
All of
across
them.
the Midwest and been to all of them. But if you've ever driven across like Nebraska, South Dakota, Iowa, like you can
Yeah.
see for 25 miles, right? And these are the Great Plains. And as the
See the
buffalo
curvature
would,
of the earth.
exactly, like you can see a storm coming from 20 miles away, right? And you're driving towards it. And buffalo instead of turning away from the storm and finding shelter, turn their horns towards the storm and walk through it, because they know it's the fastest way to get it over with, right? It's the fastest way through the storm is to actually walk through it. And so our general idea there is that leveraging tension, it's where most of the movement takes place. And so if we can turn our horns towards the storm, we can get through it quickly. If we avoid it, the less we deal with our issues, the more powerful they become. And so we want to make sure that we're the people, myself included, in my family life, like we're going to lean in, right? Like we're going to go towards the hard parts. Earning trust is all about, I'm going to meet you 51% or more, right? Like I'm going to earn it. I'm not going to assume that we have trust, but I'm going to at least go 51%. Add value is, it should be better because I'm there. If I'm there, the environment should be better. I should be having a positive impact. I should be making it better. And if I'm not, I probably shouldn't be there. Right. So our general idea is, if I'm there, I should be serving people. I should be making it better. And the last piece is to pursue purpose, which is, always be committed to something bigger than yourself. Right. Always be pushing for something bigger than you, and making the world a better place. So LEAP is my philosophy that translates into our company. So my mantra is simply LEAP.
I love that. And I have just a few comments on it. So the first one, the leaning into the hard. I had my first mentor used to tell me this all the time. He said, hard things first. If you do the hard things first, everything else will become easy. And so that's always been a similar philosophy, right? That if you do the hard things first, then you can really accomplish anything. And we talk about that with our kids. We talk about that with our team members. I talk about that with my clients. Like, let's get the hard things out of the way. And because if you do the hard things, the rest becomes easy. Second one, that trust is interesting, because I like you said, I'm going to meet you 50%, 51% or better. And I've always disagreed with the idea that trust is something that's earned, because trust is not something that's earned. Trust is something that's given, and then it's either kept or lost, right? Because you choose to trust someone. And so what you're talking about giving, I'm going to meet you 51%, is you're basically saying, I'm going to give you my trust first, and then you're going to see what happens with it. Right. And they're either going to keep that trust or they're going to lose it. And the idea of giving trust is, if you give first, then you receive back. Right. It's part of the whole operating system of our universe that we live in. Right. And so I like that as well. And then it's better because I'm there that's huge. It's huge. And our family philosophy is, we talk about this all the time with my kids, because we go a lot of places and we do a lot of things and we visit a lot of people, and so we're always in new places that are not ours. And so we talk all the time about leaving it better than you found it. And the leave it better than you found it for us is everything from, if you meet a person, leave them with a smile, right? If you're on a hiking trail, pick up the trash. Like, my kids will leave extra space in their hiking bag so they can pick up garbage on the way. I mean, it's not something I ask them to do. It's just something that they do, because it's part of like who they are, and it's something we built into it. And the last one, pursue purpose, is, man, it's a very vibrant way to live. And the thing that comes into my head is the idea of, I call it the texture and contrast of life. And a lot of people, if you look at like life like a sine amplitude, like an amplitude wave, most people are trying to compress the amplitude so that their life is as close to, I don't even know what you call it, like medium as possible. They want to avoid as much negative stuff as they can, so they reduce the amplitude, and they don't realize that like they're taking away their opportunity for great experiences and other things as well. And so pursuing purpose, for me, like one of the things that like I talk about with my wife and my kids is like, I want to live a life that's worth telling a story about, right? Which fits right into one of your 5 tenets, is learning how to tell a story. And a lot of that comes into like, if that's our purpose, how do you turn up the amplitude on everything that you're doing? Because if you have a purpose, you have a reason to turn the amplitude up, and you have a reason to accept the risks and a reason to see what you can accomplish.
Yeah.
So
I really like the metaphor you use of turning up the amplitude, right? Like instead of trying not to get harmed, right? Like instead of avoiding and turning it down so that you don't have pain, it's like you're gonna have pain either way,
Yeah.
right? Might as well turn up the amplitude and make a story out of it,
Yeah.
and then also have some really cool experiences along the way.
And that's one of those things, like, people are like, man, your life is cool, you travel all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but the same experience that allows us to, I've jumped off of waterfalls with my son and, my daughter and whatnot, and done all sorts of cool things like that, also comes with being dead on the side of the road and screaming into the desert kind of thing, right? Like, we've been in both places. And that's the whole amplitude, right? It's going to go up. You also have the other side of the amplitude. And anytime you turn the amplitude up, and that always comes with pursuing purpose, is turning up the amplitude, is that you're opening yourself up for bigger pain and bigger failure and bigger risk, but you're also opening yourself up to better rewards, more impact, and more like positive change in the world. So anyways, there's a lot behind pursue purpose.
Yeah, there's a lot behind it. And it's interesting because when I say that, everybody has their own unique reaction to it in many ways, right? Like it kind of strikes people differently. Like what it means to me might mean something different to other people. But I really like what I think turn up the amplitude would be a great t-shirt or something.
I should make that a t-shirt. That'd be good.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that.
So I think that's a great place to sort of wrap our interview. I do finish all of our interviews with one simple question. I call it the Hero's Challenge. And I do this basically to get access to stories that we might not otherwise find on our own. So the question is simple. Do you have someone in your life or in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial story? Who are they? First names are fine. And why do you think they should come share their story with us here on the Hero Show?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. The person that popped into my mind first is a guy named Stephen Freeman. He is based in Jacksonville, Florida. He runs Kairos Digital. Stephen, we often joke that we're each other's spirit animals. Like we met and it was kind of like, oh, great. Like we're just going to be friends for life. But speaking of like a values-based leader, like he has just done such an incredible job of not only just being a really good human, but also infusing his good humanness into how he runs his company and how he wants to impact people and how he's built up values and how he makes decisions about, do we work with this client or not? Or, do we hire this person or not? It's so much based on how do we lift up the human.
Yeah.
And I think there's just something really, really profound to his story and his commitment. And I would view him as somebody, I would consider a strong leader and a strong candidate for your conversation. He's a great one.
Awesome. Well, I'll see if we can reach out later and get an introduction. Maybe we can get him on the show. They don't always say yes, but when they do, we get cool interviews here. So, Dave, again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story today. I know we went a little longer than usual, but anytime they go longer, they always tend to be on like my favorite episodes. So I appreciate you taking the extra time to do that with us. Do you have any final words of wisdom for my audience before I hit this stop record button?
Honestly, just appreciate the conversation. Just a couple nuggets that I thought were really, really good in the conversation. The make it small, be it till you see it, the operational aspects, right? Like it's, knowing what to measure, the piece you talked about with, really focusing in on process. Like there's so many things to think about as a business owner, a business leader. Like the list is endless, but often it's a commitment to just a couple things that matter, really, that deeply matter to you and your company, and getting really good at those few things have outweighed impact. So I would just encourage folks to be paying attention to and listening to and thinking about what are those 20% of the activities that create 80% of the results, and how do we lean in there? And you're a good example of it. So I appreciate all you share too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. One last thing, at the end of all of the comic books, there's always the crowd of people who are cheering and clapping at the end. And our analogous set on this show is, where can people find you if they want to light up the bat signal and say, hey, Dave, I could use your help? Right.
That's great.
Where, and then who are the types of people to actually, light the bat signal up and ask for your help?
Yeah, so the two best places to find me, if you want to connect with me individually, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I think we shared that with you. That link with you, that's the one social media place that I exist. So it's the easiest way to connect with me personally. If you want to connect with our company, it's theevolvedifference.com. So theevolvedifference.com. And that is a great way to kind of learn more about the 5 facets, what we do, how we operate, and how it can serve your business. The people that are waving the bat signal, they're entrepreneurs, they're small business leaders who are looking to scale, grow, advance their business, and they're feeling stuck and they're feeling a little bit confused, like they've hit a complexity threshold, and they just need somebody to walk alongside them and show them the way.
Absolutely. Dave, thank you so much for coming today. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of The Hero Show, where we work to shift the cultural narrative around entrepreneurship and celebrate the heropreneurs who make our world a better place. Don't forget to visit our website at theheroshow.tv, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode. If you found value in our show, we'd truly appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or better yet, share it with a friend to help us spread the message of entrepreneurship as a force for good. Curious to learn more about the stories and insights of these incredible heropreneurs? Check out our in-depth interviews and resources on our website. Together, let's support and inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs as they embark on their own heroic journeys. Join us again next week for another episode of The Hero Show, where we'll continue to explore the world of heropreneurs, their superpowers, and the positive impact they bring to our lives. Until then, stay heroic.